And we are live. Welcome to On the Edge. Good morning, Bennett.
Good morning. Happy Friday to everyone. Hope
Happy
everybody's doing
Friday.
well.
Happy
What's
Friday.
going on? Who's our special guest?
We have Lang Richardson. I'll let him do the introductions. It's always awkward to do an introduction for somebody else, even though we've worked together. But still, Lang, why don't you kind of just give us the 411?
Okay, I am Lang. I am executive director of innovation at a company called um, um, Divergence. Sorry, and
It's a
we're kind of a arm of Mar Labs, which is a IT company, and we are kind of more of a consulting piece of that, where we're growing and working with customers to really understand the human side of technology and really building type of solutions and products that really will make people's life better, and then really helping them understand their business. Part of my background, I've been doing marketing, digital transformation, UX, UI, as well as dabbled in investing. So I'm glad to be here to talk about innovation and experience.
Yeah, we are so happy to have you here. It was nice to see you comment on one of our past broadcasts. And when Bennett told me about you and your experience, I thought, wow, this is going to be really exciting. And not only that, informative.
Mhm.
This is something that Bennett and I have talked about for years. He and I, probably before we knew each other, this was something that we wrote about, that we included in whatever company we were working with at the time. It was an important part of our work as marketers. And when you think about experience, right, it's more than just customer experience. It extends beyond that. And I can think of great customer experiences, right? We've had. I mean, I remember the first time I ordered shoes on the Zappos app, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is such a great customer experience. And really, it was the user experience was phenomenal. And I couldn't wait to go back and order shoes again. And I'd say, watch the cat that comes down with the parachute. It's so funny to think about the moment when you recognize a good experience in your life, right? And it goes from user experience to customer experience to candidate experience, which is something that Ben and I have been talking about and writing about for 10 plus years. And also, what was the other one? Employee experience. The really important one, about what it's like to work for an organization and what that means to the employee and how they feel about the brand that they're working for, the employer brand, and how that crosses the line into the consumer brand, and how the candidate experience can impact that. So let's get into it. Bennett, what are your initial thoughts about all of this
whole experience?
Yeah.
I just will. Anytime somebody asks me what is, when I hear the word experience, I just give it a blank stare back, because I mean, to be honest, it's like, as a
buzzword
marketer,
bingo.
Right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Right.
For
I mean,
sure.
the market has been introduced. The market and the media has been talking about all different iterations of experience. As you mentioned, the candidate experience, the user experience, the new remote work, hybrid work experience. I mean, there's so many different layers of experiences. So I just rhetorically respond. So what do you think experience is, or what the hell is experience? Because honestly, there's so many different parameters, and they're talked about at HR Tech, was talked on every single booth, and every single website says, oh, we can help strengthen your candidate experience, or we're going to help retain employees by improving the experience. And I said, so at the end of the day, again, what the hell is experience? And that's where I love to start this conversation and get Lang's input on that question, and we'll go take it from there.
Yeah, before I want to, when Bennett and I talked about real quickly, I wanted to add my thoughts because
Okay.
surprisingly,
Yes, absolutely.
we didn't have the same, initial response to what is experience. For me, it was just like the laying of a history, right? This
Okay.
experience is history. It's history that you go through. It's history that has been a part of your connection with a product, with a service, with an employer. It is that history, and we can't change history, right? So once you have a bad experience, it's embedded in you. This bad experience, right? I mean, I can remember an Uber ride from an airport in Houston one time that was just like the guy had a gas can with an ashtray sitting on it in between the seats, It's like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
So my experience with Uber was barred by that one time in
Okay.
Houston. Let's jump in, Lang. Thank you again so much for joining us and help us understand more.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm going to take a little different tack from you talking about the past. Experience is actually something that's the past, present, and also the future. So those past experiences will inform your actions in the moment, which will you projecting into the future when you want to having a more positive or more, trying to avoid a negative experience. But what I kind of like to look at experiences in several different lanes. And for our talk, I kind of did a little bit of things that I do for clients. A little bit of this diagram comes from the book of 10. Let me look at the title: The 10 Types of Innovation. So pretty much, all companies, one way or another, will go through different forms of innovation across all these different pieces here. So what we're talking about today is pretty much experience. And we've touched on a bit about it. You guys, it's the service you provide, the channels you go through, the brand, as well as customer engagement. So I like to look at it in terms of what experiences are. It's what makes us human. I mean, let's take away all the mystery behind it. Because we as marketers, we're in the business of helping accelerate sales. We're giving value to a company that's looking to find value in the customers and interactions. Operations wants to make a very holistic, efficient process in terms of building work. And if we take away experience in terms of from the buzzword it's become and the kind of a sales activator that it is in different products and services, and just look at us how we experience things as human beings, we can then take the experience of how we're just things that we go through and things that informs our next decision. So when we go through our products or services, our experiences will kind of inform us whether we're going to buy something, we're going to choose the next item to do. And if you take that as a framework as for each individual, I think organizations, whether you're creating products or services, you're trying to create cultures, you're trying to create a relationship with your brand to the community, you may want to look at experiences and how do your experiences as a company and your internal processes, as well as your interaction with customers and their experiences overlap, and then look at that as a way of creating the value proposition of how do we harmonize that and build the relationship. Because my experiences as a company is your experience as a consumer will interact, and then we'll create a great a relationship that could either build a business or it can break a business.
Very much true. Yeah.
So
it's astounding when you think of how important this is and how it is ignored. I struggle with this topic because I've been writing about it for years, right? When we talk about this, in particular, the two areas, the employee experience and the candidate experience, even in the HR and HR technology industry, there are awards given to individuals and organizations that provide an astounding or exceptional candidate experience. And it just feels like we're singing around, remember, like row, row, row your boat. It feels like we're singing and we never get to the end, which we shouldn't ever get to the end of understanding this or providing, but we never get to a place where it's actually done, where I feel like, because invariably, and I know Bennett does the same thing, I will apply for jobs just to see what kind of experience it is. And 1 out of 25 times will I get a response back immediately that says, hey, we got your application. Thank you. And then maybe 1 out of those one times, one out of those one times will I get something that says, we're moving forward without you. Right. We're moving forward. Thank you for applying, but you're no longer in consideration, whatever prim and proper language they use to make you feel like you're out, no matter what they say. Right. So how do we bridge the gap that has been there forever between wanting to provide a good experience, whether it's UX or consumer brand experience or any other kind of experience when you cruise through somebody's website, any experience? How do we bridge the gap between what we want it to be and what it is? I mean, what are the steps that need to be taken?
I think organizations will really need to embrace that they are part of that experience. What happens is that companies and our clients, we try to really change them into thinking of, hey, I want to improve my customer experience. I want to improve my user experience. And then as we go through the process of defining personas, understanding the journeys that these particular targets are going through, we introduce, what are you doing during that adventure of that user, of that candidate, that is augmenting that experience or hindering that experience? So if we look at a candidate that goes through their job posting, and they're gonna, okay, I'm gonna copy my cover letter template, I'm gonna send my resume, and I'm gonna hit 1,000 because that's my experience, is that I'm not going to get a response. So I had 1,000. I'm gonna send a bunch of them out, and then your applicant tracking system is going to flag certain things. So you're not really matching the criteria. You're going to get kicked out. If it happens to get to an individual, they're going to be frustrated, especially if there's a smaller organization where they're not screening and they've got 1,000 other things to do. They're going to just get frustrated and just not going to be able to respond because they're overwhelmed. So we should really look at ways to help organizations. Okay, what kind of systems and processes that you're doing today where where things break down, that then becomes a brand, it pulls your brand down in terms of perception and reliability. One of the things that I look at is to say, okay, here's the pain points you're going through that you're causing the candidate to have a bad experience. And these are the types of things we could do to improve that. And so that at the moments of their decisions, where I'm going to understanding things, human things like, okay, thank you for applying, even on the website. And then what next steps could be, would be powerful. And then also through the processes of, okay, get ready for the interview. It could be some things like this. These are things we're looking, for, and this is how it is to work with a company. Make it a more personal experience because you've taken the time to apply for the company. And what companies could say, hey, this is how it is to work here. So you may still have questions just because you read a job application and a post and you applied. Let me teach you about the company. Those are steps that people can take to kind of humanize that experience. And even if that is not the right candidate, you want to still have a great relationship in the place of ideas and the marketplace. That person could be a better candidate tomorrow. And then you let them know that you're moving on to other candidates and appreciate their time. So we try to help companies think through those things and create the journey that they're participating in with the customers,
Right.
with their users, with their employees. And then that goes from onboarding, it goes from considering a company in terms of attracting talent, right, through the interview process to create that a really rich way, whether it's in person or also like in video, which is more and more prevalent now. Then onboarding, as well as helping that candidate see how can I create a career within the company and magnify that and really build that relationship up. And so they can see themselves not just getting a job, but they can see themselves growing a career with that company. So I look at it as really helping them and summarizing, understanding the candidate experience and their place in it, where the technology, where the data comes through, how that building that ecosystem that links everything together on the different journeys, creating a service blueprint so they understand how to create that experience.
It's surprising to me that this is something you have to tell them, that they are part of it, right? I mean, I struggle with that, the whole, how can they not know that they are responsible part of the experience? And I also love that you said augment instead of benefit. I mean, because it doesn't always work out that way. I love that word augment. So how do you respond when they just don't get it? They just don't get that they are responsible. They want to put it on, and everything that we talked about today. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep going. Everything that we talked about today, like the Great Resignation, quiet quitting, it all places the onus on the employee, the onus on the candidate. If you have a bad candidate experience, is because you're not technical enough to understand our ATS, or you didn't apply the right way, you tried to go ahead, you just don't understand. Instead of being reflective and seeing that the biggest issue is that the employer or the hiring process is fallible and it needs to be looked at. And I also love that you talked about data, because we've been talking about data for decades, and we're still, most still are not using data.
Yeah.
Can I make a quick comment? I really do, in reaction more so than in the comments, but I think when it comes down to, so for example, I've been working on a brand new website, and, a big part of this website is about conversion. And right. So every website should be about, the focal point is conversion. But I think the interesting dynamic that I see is a experience data gap where the reason probably they don't really try to tackle it, because first and foremost, I don't think they haven't up-leveled their investment in getting to know their customer, their candidate, their employee, having these continuous interviews with your various people in the ecosystem, not just the leadership, not just the people looking at the dashboards, but the impact. I think it's interesting because my friend Nicole wrote a post today about, the plethora of wellness programs. And one of the things that she had pointed out, it's like, there's no acknowledgement that this employee is actually sick. And so, when you don't make these acknowledgement, and then you're kind of going back, so how do I make this sick employee, be more productive while they're sick? It's almost like time out, folks. You have to kind of realize and give this acknowledgement of being, that given the time and the space to actually heal. And so, when I look at kind of all of these different iterations, it's, and she also used the word, how do we humanize being sick? Because that is an interesting, concept in the context of, how do you continue to recognize employees in different ways and give them the safe spaces to be successful. And I think it all comes, bottom line is, nobody puts the worker at the center of their product strategy.
Nobody.
Or their business strategy for that. I mean, if you're in HR, we are in HR tech. So let's just use that. this is a people first business.
Yep.
Yes.
Where's the consideration of the people that are interacting with your technology?
It's a business.
I'm going to go ahead. Go ahead. Finish.
Go ahead, Lang. I just went because it's about money.
I'm going to tell you one of the challenges that I often put posts out in different areas about I think the failure of after we left COVID, we had this giant rush, and I think a lot of it's political, to be honest, pushing towards the return to work. Yeah. And we did not consider how that experience worked. Again, let's go through the whole scenario we already outlined. What was the benefits and the negative parts of that experience? Whatever it is, good. There was a lot of good, and there was a lot of disruption in terms of companies had to scramble to really make it work when remote workers and when you're looking at business, more the C-suites, this is just endemic. And the challenge is that they're looking at things from okay, let's get back to normal, which we are used to. And I am so high looking at the profit and loss of my company. I'm looking at it as, okay, how can we be most efficient? So that becomes the modus operandi. Then there's a big disconnect with, and this is my joke, the 100,000-aires. Most companies, you have well-to-do employees who they felt, oh, well, there's a disconnect between what the company's executives are looking at is to create the best competitive company, and then it runs wrong. So what we try to look at is how do you help them understand the customer experience through the employee experience, and really when they make decisions, how does it impact the people, how does it impact and so that they're sensitive to it. So a lot of times what we try to do is help people just be aware of it. They're looking at it from a financial side. They're not considering the human side. And then, and it's really a process. They're not going to get it right away. But what companies could, if they're invested in it, and if HR leaders can really look at it and say, okay, this is how our company is. This is the culture we've built. How do we create that brand relationship as we make decisions that may impact workers and changing things? And then that goes to really a good a part of really correcting that. And I think it's going to take a while. It's going to take conversations. It's going to take organizations that are going to be committed to it. But those things are going to be really powerful, I think.
And I think there's also, I think it's a very common term in HR or business leadership to call the people of their business human capital. I think trying to abolish that language will help recognize the fact that people are that these are human beings and not capital. And
or just resources,
or just resources
to make the business fun.
So I think with the perception that, people are quote unquote resources and just capital to the organization, that in itself, that mindset in itself already tells us that they're not going to put the worker at the center of their strategy or recognize how important it is to really understand, all of the processes and the pain points that, and the needs that the workers are looking for. I mean, the fact that so many workers have voiced that they do not want to go back to the office. And then you see all of these large companies saying, we're in control. We'll tell you what to do, and we'll make you come back to work. And so it's you just have to wonder, it's like, do you even have you even talked to your employees about this? And
are you listening?
I'm going to make a suggestion, and it's something, companies are going to be what they are. If culture is driven that way, you can't boil the ocean. But I think over time, what keeps us in business is that we have leadership that realize we have that gap in terms of not understanding ourselves or our marketplace, whether it's dealing with an internal challenge, in terms of growing and creating that employee culture and what type of systems to put in place to how to use the data and creating those experiences, or whether it's reaching a customer. So it's becoming a very competitive aspect. So we talked about earlier about what is experience, you know, and yes, it's a buzzword. It's all over the place, but ultimately, what companies are finding out in their bottom line is that bad experiences cost them business. Yeah. It costs them reputation. It's a brand drain. And those who prioritize that grow. And that may be a vector into helping companies. You know, you have people have different interests. Like, okay, if you're more tech focused, we're going to create a better ATS system. We're looking at better ways to track our employees throughout their journey within the companies and creating kind of that data that really that we can capture and really enhance the employee experience. A lot of times it's really, if you tie in the benefit of you tie in the benefits of financial growth and company growing in terms of just reputation to that bottom line the bottom line of growing a business to the customer experience, then it can open up a light bulb. And then you'll be able to quantify that in terms of how one can grow their market share. That opens up the process. I think it's more to a matter of education, and people like for us, it's great business, because that's what the whole consulting movement has become, because companies have already implemented every digital transformation they can. They've already have every widget, they've created every product experience, and things are still challenging because they haven't prioritized understanding the people that make all that happen.
Right. Yeah.
It's let's talk a little bit about what Caroline she wrote in about.
Yes, that's my BFF. So that's one of our colleagues. So
good. Well, thanks for joining us, Caroline. We have a few other people. Armin also here joining us. I agree with her statement about data. She wrote that asking the right questions is often not thought through, but also, are we utilizing the data that we're gathering? I think that was kind of the gist. Absolutely. That there is a how and a why one uses the data. And we've talked about that too forever. We've talked about, I mean, big data started 15 plus years ago. Everybody was talking about, are you looking at your big data? How do you store your big data? How do you research it? You know, and here we are 15 plus years later. We have amazing technology around us that gives us access to data that will help us make the right decisions for our people, for our businesses. And we still aren't utilizing the data. We still aren't studying it and then taking the results of that study and going back to the process and fixing the process or experience.
Yeah, I'm going to use a thing, and Caroline would know this, I've told her this a few times, is that, okay, we all have these wonderful plans about data, and then we have a Mike Tyson moment. When we have to use it, we'll just make a hunch and just ignore everything we learned about the data. Okay, well, I'm going with my gut. And I think it comes to, I think someone mentioned this in different talks about we don't appreciate, and one of the things we try to elevate is the iterative process of learning and refining, a refinement. That's, you hear that in a lot of UX speak. Right. And I think what happens with that is that taking in the data, you have to then make a decision and then see how it impacts and then revisit and refine. Because what we do with our data, we think that what we made a mistake with a lot of AI technology is that, oh, it's the answers. And then someone asks, okay, how do you get to the answer? Oh, I don't know. It's a black box. And so again, it goes back to, we don't understand the human touch points and the journeys that go through everything to connect that together so we can use it. And I think we want to create a process of how to use the data so that people be much more impacted by how they can take in the information, quantify it, qualify it, and then have a decisions that they could kind of feel confident in going forward in, and make sure that that is working as we assumed. The assumptions versus the reality are the gaps. And a lot of people are just, okay, like when it gets to, and I call myself a reform marketer here. So, it's like, okay, I take everything you said. Okay, I got data, great. Hey, we do data. And then it becomes the perception. Yeah.
No, we don't. We gather it. We may look at it, but then we realize we're going to have to work. We're going to have to change.
Yeah.
We're going to have to alter some things. So I'm going to go back to my gut. I'm going to go back to following, something that's easier for me to do as an employer, and costs less money. Even though, I accidentally clicked it up the second time, but bad experiences cost organizations, business, cost them money. Ultimately, in the end, they are losing money.
Right.
And we see it with organizations all around us. Bad experiences cost. There is a ride sharing. I've already mentioned him earlier, but a ride sharing business that lost business because of bad experiences by users, bad experiences by drivers. Right. And they've lost business because of it. The app no longer sits on my phone. So it's not just me. I'm not big business for them, but I think there are many people that have decided to choose one over the other, or
even if it's not big business, because companies have ingenious ways to keep money coming in, frankly. But also it's really the brand drain. It's the loss of perception. And that ultimately will cripple a company. And, they have to consider, again, going back to the top of this discussion, is that companies, if they understand themselves in relation to their different component parts, as well as their customers, they'll be able to kind of navigate this and humanize their organization. Much better than they would if they're just looking at it as like, okay, how can I make money? And I'm outside of that process. We're part of that ecosystem, and helping executives understand that, they'll be able to add value to their companies.
Yeah.
It's really frustrating as a marketer to see sometimes when you mentioned being a reform marketer, but to see the shambles that are left by bad experiences, and then marketing is expected to pick up the pieces, or how come we don't have, how come, instead of recognizing that we got to go back even further to fix the problem. We're basically bleeding internally, that the brand is damaged, and there's no magic super glue or stitches or anything that's going to fix or remove a bad experience. Like when you consider my point of it, you can't change history, right? You can't change history. And so the only thing you can do is move forward and either create a new perception of the brand, rebrand, inject some strong, fresh ideas, maybe new employees that can help with this. But what are some advice? What's some advice that you could give to a brand that maybe has done this, has made an error in judgment, and has not fixed what they should have fixed, and now they find themselves suffering from that?
I think you see brands today try to stress authenticity and being human and being part of the community. A lot of things, I think, and it's a hard question to answer, because it depends on the situation of how egregious things are, and I would just simply focus on, before they even come out and make a statement, okay, really do kind of what they do in software is kind of retrospective. What went wrong? What roles did we play into that process? And how do we make it right with customers that we care about, even if they're former customers.
Right.
Because customers can understand if you mess up and own it, it's much better proposition than pretty much ignoring it and just going about, that's just a troll, or just discount that. So I think if we go back again, a lot of things that we try to stress is to understand your personas and understand the multiple personas and how they interact with your brand to create that reality. As you guys know more than anyone, is that the brand is created through that interaction. You can position it anywhere you want, but that reality is something that's dynamic. So you don't look at the brand as a static thing. To your point, okay,
absolutely,
the brand is
not.
The brand is low, and then you create programs and systems based on experience that builds up that brand relationship. Where in the future it grows and it heals. And now you may never get that one customer back, but at least you'll be able to create a kind of a clean marketing slate after time. Time heals all wounds, and you have a stronger brand because you're now known as some brand that takes accountability for past mistakes.
And to that point, I mean, if we consider and think about what happened with Tylenol, I think it was about 40 years ago.
There you go. Right? That's what we're talking about.
Tylenol that acknowledged their mistake,
right, and
changed everything for over-the-counter medicines and how they are packaged.
Right.
Safety of that altered forever. And if we go back and sit in the middle of that crisis, who would believe that Tylenol would still be standing this many years later, right? Because they, to your point, owned up, they faced it, they acknowledged the challenge that was before them. They considered future, if we want to still be in business, we better fix this, and we need to be the center of the fix. And, so that's perfect example of your point.
Yeah. And I guarantee you, if we were able to dig through their documents, we were able to sit in those meetings and go back in the past, they were all talking about, they may not have had the language of experience, but they were talking about that. They were talking about that was a very calculated and very organized way to protect that brand and grow it and go through it. Yeah.
Right. And it worked. So what do you think, Bennett? What's the, when we talk about, because you and I have talked so much about candidates, it's exhaustive.
It's exhaustive. It's almost like instead of, it's great to, for those companies that are going through, and, I applaud the companies that put their brand at the center of research being done on candidate experience. I think the interesting element is, what do they do with the feedback that they get with that? Like you mentioned, like this, I like that whole notion of retrospective. It's funny because that humanly, we actually did that on a biweekly basis, connect, all the employees would say, what's top of mind? What are you thinking about? Right. Those types of things. I think, that's a great sign of a culture that definitely values the input of their employees, their candidates, and such. But I think interesting enough is, how do you kind of, market that type of, how do you bring to life this notion that you're doing, that you do biweekly retrospectives? If it's, it's part of the culture that's being developed and grown from the feedback of the employees. So I really like the idea, that tip about doing retrospectives. And it's like, it's as simple, for example, in the recruiting space, and this goes back to a point, an observation, continuously put yourself in the seat of the applicant, apply for your job, go through your application process, yourself, and really feel what you're going through. Because, like, even as a, anybody who comes onto my team in marketing, the first thing I have them do is, go check out this company's, application experience. Find out, how long it takes, how long, do you get any response back? Is it automated? And then when do they reach back out to you from a human perspective about scheduling yourself for an interview? And let's time and map that all out. It's, again, and that is because as a marketer, I do feel you have to also be the one to step into the seats of all your buyer personas. And they don't just need to, and this is I think the pitfall in HR tech is they're all focused on the people who are going to pay the bills. And the reality is that the biggest population is everybody interacting with the technology, whether it's an employee, candidate, gig worker, whatever. And partner. I think partner. Yeah. So there's so many different personas to think, there are different parts of the ecosystem, as you mentioned, Lang, that you have to get yourself into and understand. And pick up the phone. It's really, schedule these interviews and start to assimilate and realize what the patterns are. Because when I go back to the exercise on my website, having to talk to customers who've come on board, asking them the questions. So what were the things you're looking for on the website to make you want to schedule that demo? And right. And so understanding their needs and making sure that's integrated back into the experience. And so, that's why a marketing website is it's a living, breathing, very iterative product that needs to constantly be changing. So that's kind of my commentary and observation now that I've had a much clearer understanding about, what experience is. And it is, I think we put a lot of emphasis on design thinking, but do we really think about, the people side of it? We all focus inside the technology, but as you mentioned, is people and technology win. Technology alone doesn't win. People alone don't win, but it's that integration experience, that integrated, solution that, or experience that you're putting forth. And that is, I think that's mission critical. And of course, there's a lot more we can talk about there, but.
Like I want to touch on augment again. Armin wrote about AI, how it can help. I'm going to say augment, how it can augment the human aspect within an organization or within a product, within a tech, within, any experience. What are you getting pushback still? I mean, AI was a buzzword,
Yeah, it still is.
It was, yeah. So is it really artificial intelligence? Is it more augmented intelligence? Andrew Godonsky and I did a series on what is AI really? Is it automated intelligence? Is it artificial intelligence?
It's a lot of that. Is you're hitting at it what it really is. If we look at it as just by itself without the ecosystem, it's mysterious. Oh, there's just magic behind it. Throw it inside. Okay, how do we work? How do we get information? How do we synthesize information? How do we act on information? So AI is just another tool like design thinking, like any other tool to help us understand the data that we're getting. AI is based on data. And so we're going to look at ways where can we then predict based on the data of a probability of going A or B. I look at in a lot of in terms of the AI that impacts the HR, it's really, can we create products and services with AI that helps augment our understanding of a candidate and their likelihood of succeeding within a company? Can we look at AI to automate the amount of hires that we need to make to allow for decision makers, ultimately in the end, that we're human, to figure out whether this candidate is worth having a conversation with or not? And then also, like for organizations like ours that really create those type of experiences, how do we then qualify the information that we get from a quantitative standpoint that allows for the end user to not miss out on a great candidate? And so those are, and again, I always go back if we look at AI as just a tool, not as a magic wand, it would allow us to place it in the right context. and allows us to create the perfect solution that doesn't make it bigger than it is. It's a tool. And then,
So Lang, I want you to show your diagram again now that we're 45 minutes into our conversation.
Okay.
I want to look at it.
Friend.
And I love this diagram, and we'll post like a screenshot of it also for and put it in
I want to shout out Larry Keeley and all those guys. I love this book that I got it from. The credit is all theirs.
Okay, great.
And even though we didn't talk about innovation extensively, I want to simply remind people it's just outcomes. If you do things well, if you create the right experiences and you create the right strategies, innovation is the outcome you get. So we're focusing on experience, but as you see in this diagram, there's innovations you can have in profit, network effects, structure, performance, and systems, which often be technology, but not exclusively technology. So when we look at that, it's really the outcome that we need to kind of think about.
Sure.
And really, and that I think will bridge the challenge that we may have with the C-suite, because they're all about those earlier parts of that diagram.
Right.
And if we're able to tell the story that how the experience strategy we create for our employees will help that improve that bottom line and show it in a way that's logical, how they think, that can survive a challenge of the investment, the questions they may have, then we can have that sort of transformation, and we don't have to create, you don't have to make other humans who have different roles and responsibilities into heroes and villains. They're just, we have, or I think what I love about what we do, not just for our company, but just anyone in this typical industry of like experience, is that we're based on trying to understand and empathize with all of the different components of the system, all the different stakeholders, all the different personas, the users, and then how can we create better systems so that everyone wins in the end?
Yeah.
So do you think business owners, that those that are in charge of all of these things, do you think they're starting to listen?
I think we're in a good spot where we are getting a lot of companies who already know they need the help.
Yeah.
Then we're launching on different marketing channels to help companies who may not know they need us yet to learn about, and that's just part of education outreach and showing how these sorts of solutions will help improve their business. So I think it's really awareness building. A lot of the larger, Fortune 500 companies are starting to realize, like, whoa, this is really a missing factor in our organization, especially when you're doing new brand launches or you're trying to reformulate a brand. Understanding all those components are going to be important for their success in the future. Like we already know. Go ahead.
Is it more important for the bigger brands, or because there is so much? I mean, we can consider, I could name 10 brands right now that everybody knows. Everybody knows, everybody's heard of. They don't have to do any marketing. They don't have to do any employee engagement. They don't have to do, because employees are dying to work there, right? So they don't have to do much because this company's name on their resume would look great. Using this product makes sense if you're a consumer, because it's I've owned one since 2007. I'm not going to change now. In particular, talking about iPhone, right? So how do you help organizations that feel like they don't need the help make a shift? Because we know, MySpace didn't think they needed help, and something.
Yeah.
And they're still around, and they've shifted shifted gears
That's
and are appealing to a different. So what is the best way to convince?
that's part of the consulting relationship, because typically is that whether it's a cold relationship, meaning that net new logo, or whether you have a previous relationship where they know you for one particular thing that you may have helped them in the past. We really seek out to kind of introduce different services and help them understand different pain points they may be going through in their business. They may say, hey, look, we want to improve employee retention, to use the HR thing. How can we best do that? They may be looking for they want to upgrade the ATS system to be able to accomplish that. And then we would okay, well, that's kind of the end goal, but how do we understand ourselves and our customers? So a lot of times we approach it from really building a relationship, human to human, about understanding the pain points. And then we show our competencies of how we can help them understand it. And that begins the relationship that oftentimes for us, and as well as anyone else in the industry, it grows into kind of pilot projects, things that we can test and show the viability of the idea. And then that becomes, once we pilot that idea and test it and grow it, and then it typically gets launched into a larger initiative in the company. Right. And what our promise is really to help companies really think about those things better, and then really find that nugget of problems they are going through that we can help with. Not everyone's going to have those problems, and we're there. But we want to be able to communicate when you do have them. If you do have them, we're there to help you.
Yeah, I think in this very dynamic, and I would say pretty cluttered technology environment, I think a lot of what technology anybody can really start to do. It's this whole notion of we spend so much time talking about us and never talking about them in terms of the pain points. And so I don't know all the different pain points, but you know what? I could tell you where I can help you. And, when you think about the notion of challenges that, especially early stage companies have, it's you got to create the awareness, especially if you're trying to break into new categories. This notion of creating the demand, not wait, because the demand is not going to flow into you because they don't even know they have a pain point yet. But you understanding and letting them know, here are a series of 10 use cases of how to use this technology. Something will end up resonating that will help then start that very engaged conversation where they can go back and start talking to specific parts of the organization to get them on board and such. So, at the end of the day, part of the customer experience is helping, like you said, Lang, so much of the work is around education, because there's so many things that we are all doing at such very different angles, because at the end of the day, a lot of the buyers, they have I want to fix this outcome, but this one outcome probably can have 100 plus angles that can address that outcome. But until you figure out and talk to you and figure out where the root cause is, it's very hard to really kind of attack that issue and challenge and begin to improve that part of the experience. So I think it's again, the bottom line is, for a lot of anybody in the B2B technology space, it really is get out there and really keep creating the demand by raising up the use cases that your technology is able to help with. And that will help. You'll realize somebody is going to lean in on, one or multiple parts, issues that you're addressing. And that's how quality leads are generated and new customers are won and retained. So.
And I want to address Ashish's comment here about Ashish. I hope I said that correct.
Yes,
correct.
Ashish.
With so much data available, customer expectations change all the time, right? And to that point, how often are customers of technology where they can source data not sourcing data from the technology, right? And many of these companies will charge to educate their users on how to source data. You know, they create an income stream within the technology itself by causing the consumer of their product to require additional spend so that they can learn all the nooks and crannies of the technology, right? I mean, it's
I think also what this that the comment really talks about is that in a competitive landscape where companies are always like the data is
yes,
is they have to contextualize the data to be able to respond to their business and their marketplace, is that you always have to be nimble enough to really fast changing environment, competitive pressures, disruptors in your environment, that companies really have to sit back and, okay, how do I respond? You know, that's where a lot of the services that we provide will come in, and helping them really build that context to be able to put the right systems in place, understanding the whole customer journey life cycle, and then to be able to have the right recommendations. So that, going back to the earlier questions about how do we get, you know, how do we convince companies that may not see they have a problem? We help them. You know, we know that there's a competitive challenge they have in their business to grow, to be able to kind of grow their brand, to grow their reach with the customers. And then we really help put that picture together of how they understand their experience with themselves and their customers. And then how can technology and products and solutions that we can create that help augment that and help them solve those sticky problems of growth they may have.
You know, it's clear that experience is so vital for everybody involved. I mean, not just the business. I mean, that's what we're trying to hammer home, how important it is for the business. But you know, when we consider the alignment, I mean, we could take candidate experience and layer employee experience on top of that, and layer consumer experience on top of that, right? And user experience on top of that. And there is alignment in what's missing, right?
Yeah. And yeah, the problem, the thing that we try to do is this, you know, you're going to hear anyone in this field talk about all of those experiences, and they typically talk about them separately. What we try to do as a framework is to look at them. How do those independent experiences that maybe a candidate's going through, how does that interact with the recruiter experience that's happening when they're looking at hundreds of those people?
Absolutely.
And then what kind of systems are behind the scenes that we talked about, data in terms of being able to help that recruiter make a decision between the 15 to the 5 to the 1 they're hiring, and then create not only a system that helps get that through to be able to augment that company's candidate experience, but also to create the sort of repeatability that you have when you have technology. Technology is the value of technology is that you're building systems that are repeatable, that can handle all sorts of cases, whether your main use case or edge use cases. So we call that, like, we use service blueprints for that, to be able to take multiple customer journeys, overlay them onto the back end, so that we'll be able to give a snapshot of both a current state where the problems are with a customer, as well as future state pieces that will help companies see, this is how we can innovate this system, improve these KPIs and OKRs for you.
Totally.
And I can't believe we're out of time. we
could talk about this all the time.
All day.
And of course, Ben and I always will be in our own chats.
Well, we'll have to have you back, because we wanted to dive into ATS. You know, we really wanted to dive into, why does everybody hate their ATS? So let's think about that, and we'll come back and talk about that.
Yeah, you know, definitely. I've got some friends that you know, work with that really are know how all those systems work from a technology standpoint, and as well as they have the chops and experience. So definitely, we can definitely have a bigger party next time with everyone.
Before we get away, Lang, if
Yes.
people want to get in touch with you, is it best just to reach out to you through LinkedIn or?
LinkedIn can be a great thing. Starting next week, a few weeks from now, we're going to be launching our website. It's divergence.consulting. And also from our parent company, everyone can reach out to marlabs.com. And, myself and my team and the whole organization, that's what we do. So we're looking forward to anyone wanting to have a conversation with us.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're definitely going to have you back.
For sure.
There's just too much to cover here.
Yeah.
Any last words, Bennett?
No, not from my standpoint. I think a lot of my eye roll. Not that we covered it, which actually
covered your eye roll today.
I was waiting for that part of it.
My eye roll is integrated into a lot of the talk tracks in terms of not really focusing, not solely executing, the worker from your product, from your strategy, but it's you have to really look at all the different individual all the contributors into the ecosystem to make that experience, right? I think that is my takeaway, and my eye roll has always been we focus way too much on a singular silo and never really think about the impact it has, and it is about the whole ecosystem, not just one sliver of it. So that's my eye roll. That was my eye roll.
Well, thanks again, guys. It was a great conversation,
yes.
And we'll be back next week with another episode of On the Edge.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Weekend.